The year is 1998. I am 2 years old. My mother rushes about the house as she packs our essentials into a suitcase. We hurriedly hop into a car. She covers the windows with pillows, lest the Jakarta rioters catch a glimpse of our faces and discover that we are Chinese. We flee to Malaysia, and then we move to Singapore. And we wait, not knowing when we could return home. So we started to build our lives there. My father's job allowed him to be transferred to the Singapore office. My mother started to make bags, and I went to school. Every Sunday morning, we would go to a church and talk to a priest there, whom my younger brother would be named after just 2 years down the road. On our way back, we would make sure to stop by our favorite coffee stall and grab a bite of kaya toast and soft-boiled eggs, my favorite breakfast food. As the three of us learned to navigate our new lives, we became inseparable. The few years I spent growing up in Singapore is the reason why English is my most proficient language. Over the years, it has proven to be both a blessing and a curse. It is a blessing because my level of proficiency earns me precious opportunities, such as being an English language reporter covering banking news in Asia. It is a curse because it has caused a rift between me, my parents, and my peers. We moved back to Indonesia when I was 6 years old. By that time, I did not know how to speak the language, Bahasa Indonesia. I was singled out in my new school because I couldn't understand my friends' jokes. They thought that I was too good to speak Bahasa and that I was too cocky to hang out with them. Over the next decade, instead of assimilate, I retreated to my comfort zone in Disney Channel series, Hollywood movies, and English language novels. When I was 12 years old, my teacher taught us that Western influence is bad. So if people started associating me with Western elements, does that make me a bad person? And at 16 years old, I heard just that. Rebecca is too westernized. So what does that mean? Am I a bad person? Over the same period, my parents had to struggle with my westernization as well. And it became a real problem when I received a scholarship offer to go to a university in Hong Kong to study business and finance. My mother was scared that I would change, that I'd be exposed to certain elements and values that she did not necessarily subscribe to. But the fact that I got a scholarship brushed my mother's fears of my becoming a different person aside. If you've ever been to Hong Kong, then you would know it is an interesting blend of a city. It is a melting pot of Eastern and Western ingredients infused together in segregated communities. Kind of like a buffet where you can choose whatever you want to your liking. The Disney, Hollywood, English novel reading girl inside of me made the Western part my main dish. But I had a good helping of spicy Asian dishes on the side. Having not seen my family for a while, I was really excited to go back for my first break. My mother is relieved that I came back the same child, only more confident. After living alone, I had the courage to acknowledge where my strengths are and talk myself up to her friends, which was something I've never been brave enough to do before. The second year brought different challenges. As I joined the Hong Kong feminism movement, my parents and I started to have little disagreements over our Skype calls. The disagreements became more apparent as my Western involvements snowballed into TEDx's, international best-selling author visits, slam poetry. My father once quipped that I should find a guy who's rich enough so that I can marry him and he can buy me a car. To which I replied, I will buy my own car, thanks. Stopping short at disclosing that I might actually not be attracted to men. I was interested in issues such as Black Lives Matter, the Dreamers, the Paris Climate Deal, and that made little to no resonance with my parents. I'd never lived in the United States before, so they did not understand why I was so engaged in a world that I don't live in. Things started looking better in my third year. By that time, my parents couldn't afford to finance anything but my tuition fees, so I worked 3 jobs alongside being a full-time student in order to pay for rent, for food, and for overseas experiences, such as a mandatory study term abroad. My parents are amazed and proud at my independence and persistence. Betting on their good mood, I decided to tell them and risked saying that I date girls. My mother walks out of the room. She breaks the silence 2 days later by saying, "I regret sending you to Hong Kong. Those Western values got to you, and I have failed as a parent." The rift that I have between my parents and I is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that my mother said what she said, but it also made sense. If you look at the spectrum of news I was raised with, there was no spectrum. My parents grew up learning and knowing about Westerners being involved in Western politics and issues, and local citizens taking part in local happenings. They did not know, say, the struggles of Asian immigrants in the American workforce, or of Westerners embracing the Muslim religion in Indonesia, because those stories simply go unheard, kind of like how mine is to them. However, that spectrum is slowly being filled in by people who are willing to speak up. People like me, like those in this room, and people we give voices to. As I was writing this story, I discovered that ever since from a young age, I was not meant to conform. Instead of assimilating, I chose to press on forward to live my truth. My parents blamed Westernization as the culprit of our rift. But what is Westernization exactly? Is it who I love, how I think, what content I consume? There are a lot of misconceptions and debates about it, and I don't fully understand it either. All I know is, despite our differences, my parents and I still get along. Sure, we don't talk about the issues we have different stances on, but we still talk. I have faith in their love for me and in my love for them. It might be a stretch to hope that we have the capacity to understand each other fully, but the beauty of love and compassion is that they always override those differences. And as long as we are willing to press on together, we'll be all right. Thank you.